Guys, they should be starting soon. They're running a few minutes late. Thanks for tuning in. It'll get quiet once it starts.
I'd like to welcome everybody as everybody's kind of getting seated. I want to thank you for coming. And yes, that, oh, I'm in the middle. I should know that for the first time. And yes, that is my car, but in the very back, if Norm Wright would put his hand up. Norm, can you put your arm up? That's the guy that built the car.
Oh, wow.
I just get to have all the fun with it, okay?
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Alicia Fink. I'm the chair of the Morgan Manning House Museum Fundraising Committee, and I welcome you. It's a pleasure to welcome you. If you can't hear me, let me know, please, because there's no microphone. Is everybody? Oh. Okay, it's a pleasure to welcome you to this, the first informational presentation after the devastating fire of our beloved Morgan Manning House Museum. As the rebuilding and restoration progresses, more informational meetings will follow. It's important to keep our supportive community informed. Before we begin, the members of the Board of Directors of the Morgan Manning House Museum would like to thank several groups for their support and generosity. Number one, the owners of this beautiful Whitehall Mansion for opening their doors to us for tonight's meeting. The Brockport community for their donations and the organization of fundraisers. Wegmans, who generously donated the food for today's reception, and Mayhans for the wine that we will be serving. You are all invited after the program for a little refreshment in the back. To Caurie Putnam, who has kept the community and our members, our absent members, informed, especially the night of the fire.
Thank you, guys.
The Brockport school system, who supplied us with office space so that our organization could continue operating during this very difficult and important time. Last but not least, the Nativity Church for opening the night of the fire to allow the firemen to have a place to go and warm up, and also because they have allowed us to have our monthly meetings in their facilities. With pleasure, I introduce you Scott Hunsinger, the president of the board and Paul Kimball, the former president and now project manager. They will speak about the work being done towards the restoration of our beloved house.
So, just very quickly, the house that you're in was built by the Gordons, and the Gordons own the house directly on the opposite side of the street of the Morgan Manning house. The big white mansion, if you will, and this was built by their son. So, if you've ever done presentations before, you know that he who owns the clicker owns the power.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming, and it's an honor to be able to stand in front of you and talk to you about something that's not that fantastic. When we all woke up on the morning of January 14th, I don't think anybody really deep down inside was looking for anything bad to happen that day. It was cold, it was snowy, and it was another day in Brockport. As we all went through our day, we ended up sometime around 6:30. If you are a member of our board, we were getting ready for our monthly meeting. Some of us got there a little bit early, and I'll keep the clicker, but I will let Mr. Kimball describe how he arrived at the house.
So that evening, we were planning our board meeting at 7 o'clock. I got there around 10 to 7 because I was going to set up a Zoom meeting for some of our members who were out of town. When I got there, Mary Lynn Turner, who's on the board, and Mike Schaefer were already there, and they were standing by the kitchen door as I got there, and as they opened the door, the smoke was just rolling out. So I went in, attempted to go down in the basement, and there was no lights in the basement, so I ran out to my truck. Meantime, they had already called 911. We were fortunate because the fire department was having a drill at the firehouse that night. So I went out and grabbed a flashlight, came back in the kitchen, looked around, and the only thing I could see was a doily. And I grabbed the doily as a face mask to get down in the basement, and got to the bottom of the stairs, and I could hear a crackling sound, and I wasn't there to be a hero. I knew the fire department was coming. I went back outside, met up with Mike and with Mary Lynn. As Mike and I walked along the north side of the building, we looked into the basement window and we could see a small flame. All of us pretty much felt that it was going to be a little fire put out, a little bit of smoke, and we'd be back, everything would be fine. Firemen came, we explained to them where we saw the fire. They went down in the basement, extinguished the fire in the basement, and then came up and started to go through the house. And that's when they realized the fire was in the walls. And I'll speak a little more about that later.
So with this presentation, we hope to give you a little bit of an understanding of what happened that night, what has happened since, and then what's going to be happening going forward. It's a massive undertaking, and it's a massive undertaking that the members of the Morgan Manning House Museum and the board of directors are ready for a challenge. If there's one thing that Brockport does very well is it rises up to any challenge that we've ever been faced, even the Main Street Bridge. That's my only joke for the evening. Low-hanging fruit. An image from that evening that summarizes a couple of things. One, we had a fire that we really didn't know what was going on. Over the course of the evening, marrying into a family who is very fire involved, I've understood and gotten to learn a lot about fires and things through my awesome father-in-law. But nothing prepares you for something like this. And as Paul said, we were in the back, sitting in cars, kind of watching things happen, watching the smoke come out. The billows of black smoke coming out, then it would be white smoke, then it would be black smoke, and it was really smoke, it was steam, and it was everything that was transpiring inside the house. One thing that I had never heard as we were talking to the chief and talking to several firefighters was they were on the offensive. They were fighting the fire offensively. About an hour later, we got an update that things had gone from an offensive fire to a defensive fire. And things kind of changed. Here's an overhead view of everything that had transpired up to this point. The great thing, the 11 fire companies that helped us that evening positioned themselves around the outside and they got water onto it. Paul will speak to the amount of water in his part of the presentation. Again, a community coming together. I can't say enough about Caurie and what she does with the Brockport Blog. At one point, I looked on my phone, over 4,000 people were watching. If this was in the summer, we all know Brockport, those 4,000 people, however close to the fire itself, would have been there and would have probably caused more problems than it would have created not to be there. So again, we're blessed to have Caurie as part of our village community and our village team. As the time progressed, we started realizing that the fire had gotten into the walls and fighters were doing everything in their power to extinguish it. At this point, this geothermal, did I say that right? Not geothermal. Thermal imaging. All the yellows or the oranges are sections of heat, and as that is developing, it was something that none of us, I think, really understood how it was going to go. We were blessed to have 11 fire companies and the number of volunteers coming and fighting the fire and doing what they needed to do. We were across the street in Nativity Church watching it from that big glass area. Now, when you're in there, that big glass area there, you've got a great view of a fire. Not something that I would suggest that anybody really wants to do, but we were front and center for it. As it went on, and this picture kind of speaks volumes as we get into the presentation. This gentleman here, God bless him for what he did at that minute right there. But I also have to thank God that he wasn't in that position about 30 minutes later. So as we are watching the fire, and we're watching it now start to come out through windows, come out through the roof, we were told that if we lose the Belvedere, we're going to lose the house. So now, members of the board that are in the Nativity watching, to say that we're on pins and needles doesn't really even start to cover it. As the fire progressed, and as Paul will tell you, this is the spot right here that we saw that gentleman up on the roof. As the fire enveloped and went into the roof and the overhang came down, it was just one event after the next that really showed the significance of how intense the fire was. And again, the different fire companies, the lights, everything, execution was, as far as I can tell, they did what they needed to do, and there was blinders on, they were ready to go. This is kind of where we were. This was the warming station that we provided, that the Nativity provided for us. The Rooster, Domino's, Dunkin' Donuts, all giving coffee and water and food for those, the brave men and women of the fire districts that helped us. This picture says 1,005 words, and I say that because as we're in there, the shifts of firefighters coming in, getting warm. That was a cold night. We'll discuss as we get into this how that temperature range over those 5 or 6 days in January really were a blessing, if there is a blessing in disguise, for the overall fire and what it did to the house. But watching these brave souls come in, the expressions on their face, they weren't just giving 100%, they were giving everything that they had to do their job. Watching them come in, watching them come out, and all of us just hoping that there was going to be a light at the end of the tunnel. Four-sided, everybody, all hands on deck, the amount of ladder trucks, the amount of water Paul will speak to, but it's an ominous undertaking. And again, we want to thank, and we will continue to thank, the 11 districts that helped us: Brockport, Albion, Urgent, Shiloh, Churchville, Clarendon, Gates, Kendall, Leroy, North Greece, Hamlin, Walker, Morton, and Spencerport. Without their efforts, we would be having a whole different discussion. So now as we get into what transpired after, it was probably about 11:15 when I said, mentally and physically, I'm exhausted. I made the 4-block walk back to my home on State Street. The snowflakes were puffy, it was quiet, it was surreal. Everything in my mind was, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do? What are we going to do now? What are we going to do now? And the one thing that I knew was, we're going to rebuild. I don't care what it takes. We're going to figure it out. And I think that maybe inexperienced sediment in myself as I'm walking home might be one thing, but it speaks volumes of the group of people that you have representing that house in the undertaking that we have going forward. And now Paul will speak on the details of the fire.
So I get to do the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm going to be referring to the house during these pictures. Here is Main Street down here. Down here and here are the front part of the house where most of the damage was. The large structural damage was done to the back part of this parlor and this wall, and then this is the second floor. So the fire started over about in here where the boiler was. It started in a control valve in the boiler system. It was a control valve that would open and close to let water flow to the second floor to heat it. It had been installed December 5th because it was written right on it. And this was January 14th. We don't know why that would start a fire. It was low voltage. But the fire traveled from here, and I'll show you some pictures later, through 2 floor joists, right over to about right there in that wall. And in that wall, when they built the house, they built the floor joists first, then they built the wall on top of it, and then they brought the floor in, and it left a gap about that big. And just like a chimney effect, the air pulled that fire across the floor, up that wall, across that ceiling, up into this, up into this room right here, which had the floor burnt right out of it, into the wall, up that wall, and then up into the actual attic where it did the real damage. So I'm going to show you this. This is when they set up heat in the building, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But it's a couple days later, and it gives you a walkthrough of what we saw. There we go. This area through here and going out to the back, there was 5 inches of water. You can see the high water mark on some of the walls. There was 5 inches of water going straight out through the back and out the back door. And now you even get a tour of the basement. It was over waist deep water in the basement. The reason it was not any deeper is it got to the height of the windows and it ran out. There were 3 ladder trucks set up. There was one set up on Main Street, South Avenue, in the rear of the building. All 3 of them pouring water through the roof. Let's go to the next one. The upstairs one is not as long or as dramatic, but you're starting in the museum room that was at the top of the stairs. You're going to go into the bedroom that was set up. And then you're going to go over into the children's room. So this is what the house looked like the morning that we got there. I had been there till almost midnight that night. I was back the next morning at 8 o'clock and really wasn't prepared to see what I saw. The staircase that you saw, by the time this one had taken, the staircase was completely frozen. The doors in front were all frozen open, and it was an incredible mess. So here's an aerial view, the Main Street out here. This is where the concentration of the fire was, in here, and into the Belvedere here. The firemen had cut several holes, one large hole that I'll show you later right there. And what that hole did, because the fire was over here, the fire actually got sucked around and up through here and has destroyed the entire roof structure. We are going to have to replace this entire roof structure here, and I'll talk about it a little later, but that hole right there, there was a chimney right between these 2 windows, and a chimney between those 2 windows. And when the fire burnt down the roof far enough that the cornice, which was 4 foot out, was more weight than roof that was left, it actually flipped off. And so what you're seeing right here is what was the cornice that flipped off. And when it flipped off, one of the chimneys went in and one of the chimneys came out on the ground. And then this is just a full aerial view around here. This part of the roof, because the fire was in here, this part of the roof is severely damaged. This is the lower part of the house, which actually, from the fire standpoint, sustained very minimal damage, because one of our members, Caurie Fox, had come in during the day, closed all the doors between the large part of the house and the lower part of the house, and it helped contain the fire to the front part of the house. This is just another picture of the roof area, and what was interesting about it is that the fire was so hot, it burnt the roof off, and there's no debris. And it didn't burn the lower floorboards. It just burnt the roof totally right off of it. So this is storm wrappers. Little humor here. It kind of sounds like a reality TV show, right? Storm wrappers are here. They were recommended to us. They were the ones that came in and put the big white tarp over the entire house. Here they are working on it. They had work they had to do to cut things back. You'll notice here that all this brick is broken off. It's going to have to be rebuilt at some point. You see it over here again. They came in on a Saturday, and they put the first covering on, if you will. We had 60-mile-an-hour winds that day. They came back on Sunday when the winds had toned down to 40 and put the top back on with 40-mile-an-hour winds. I was really impressed. We'll talk about expenses later, but that little wrapping and the little turtleneck around that was $23,000. That being said, it just kept the rain, the water, and everything out during the course of what we're working on. This was the heat that was set up. So this right here is what's called a desiccant dryer. Basically, it's a gas-fired dehumidifier. So what we did, not we, what they did, is brought in, as part of that, there's heat. So they very slowly brought the heat up, and at the same time, the desiccant dryer is pulling the moisture out, right? So we're bringing the temperature up very, very slowly. You'll see some pictures where there's icicles hanging from the ceiling inside. So we're slowly bringing the temperature up, and then we're bringing the water out. Doing that, and I'll show you some furniture where it made a huge difference in terms of saving that furniture and saving the woodwork. Because if you remember, if you've been in the house, the two red rooms, the reception room and the library, was just full of beautiful quarter-sawn oak. And so that had water and ice on it. You had to bring that up slowly, bring the water out of it slowly, so you didn't do further damage to it. That right there, that desiccant and the heater, was $20,000 a week. It was $100,000 for 5 weeks. It was $4,000 a week for fuel. And then there was a man on site that had to monitor it. This is where the fire started, and that's where it traveled down between two rafters. And when I tell you it traveled down those two rafters, there's no burn on the other side. There's not like it fanned around the joists. Those are the floor joists, not rafters, I'm sorry. Floor joists in the basement. It burnt right down the center of them, got sucked up the wall. The interesting thing is, we were probably losing heat for 150 years. It's hard to see here, but that's the hole where it came up the wall. And there's another picture here. That's the 2x4 area where it came up the wall. There's the floor. Another picture of it over here. So this is where the boiler was over here. It traveled down between those two rafters and came up. It also came up on the outside of the wall under the stairs here, but didn't do any damage to the inside of the wall over here. So what you're looking at now, this is standing as you first enter the house and look at the front parlor. This is standing, this picture would be as if you're standing right here and you're looking that way down through the two parlors, right? So this is where the bifold doors would have been. There's the back parlor. That's where the chimney came through there, came through there. When it fell through here, the pool table, thought that was a good billiards table. That's right. Because a billiards table only has 3 balls. So the billiards table thought it was a great idea and followed it down through. This cabinet was up on that back wall. This is another picture. This picture is standing and looking from the dining room into the parlor, so you're looking in a reverse. This is upstairs looking down. This is where the attic had burnt off. And right there, you can just see where the 3 balls for the billiard. There's a better picture.
Oh my.
So right there is the billiard ball. So you see that line right there, and you see that line right there. So look right there and right there. It's about a 12-inch difference. That's how far that wall has dropped and is currently supported. This picture was taken after they shored stuff up, and I'm looking straight up and out, up through up through this hole right here. So there's a little funny humor. The 3 balls never moved. The wall moved, the ceiling collapsed, the floor came down.
That's crazy.
But the 3 little balls never came out.
Wow.
This is another picture of that same mess, if you will.
If you take a look, it's like a sick and twisted version of Frozen. Everything frozen. And that's why it was so important to raise the temperature of the building, and also taking into consideration the humidity. If this would have been the spring or the summer, we would have been dealing with black mold. We would have been dealing with all kinds of an even worse mess. There are 3 of those giant desiccants in the U.S., and we were very fortunate that one was near us. And we were able to get it and have that work for us.
So we went through 3 phases of asbestos abatement. And if we were in any other state except New York and also California, asbestos here, which was very minimal, would have been much, much cheaper. So the only asbestos that was in here was from the drywall from the fire of 1964. No other asbestos whatsoever, okay? And the only asbestos, if you're familiar with doing drywall, is the mud that goes into taping the seams. And that mud had 8% asbestos in. So a company came in to do tests in the very beginning and find out where there was asbestos hot spots. But because these ceilings collapsed down on that whole pile, we had to treat that whole pile as it was contaminated asbestos. Right now, we are at $250,000 in asbestos removal for 8% asbestos in tape. And if you were in any other state other than the one you're sitting in or California, that would have just been hauled out. To give you an idea, 1,000 bags and counting to clean out just that one spot that I showed you. Stuff had to be cut down into sections about this big, probably filled no more than a kitchen garbage bag, and then double bag, taped. In the meantime, every place they're working, you see the plastic here, the windows, all the windows had to be totally sealed and create a negative pressure on the space. Then any place they weren't working or walking through, the floors, the walls, the ceiling were double-sided with plastic, 10 mil plastic. Just so you know, 10 mil is very thick plastic. It doesn't bend real easy. They had to do all that around that. Every roll-off container that was totally enclosed had to be double-sided with plastic all the way around the front, the back, the doors. The amount of plastic that we put in a landfill for this 8% asbestos is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Now we're seeing the cleanup. So, here's the good news, bad news. The bad news is, folks, a chimney fell in your living room. The good news is, a chimney fell in your living room. What's that? The picture that Scott had showed you of the firefighter on the roof of the sunroom, had that chimney fallen in the other direction, it would have fallen on the sunroom, crushed the sunroom, and we would have had even more additional expenses to rebuild the sunroom. As it was, the ceiling that came through, the floor that came through, were already burnt. They were going to have to be replaced regardless, right? And they probably did us a favor also because it brought the pool table down to the first floor and made getting it out a lot easier. Billiards table? Here's another picture of it cleaned up. You're looking here, you're looking through the south parlor, that's the dining room door, and this isn't all cleaned up. And where that chimney landed, because there was so much debris coming down in front of it, it didn't damage the structure underneath. There's the other part of the chimney that fell, and this is the minimal damage from where the roof flipped off. There's a broken pane of glass, but all in all, the sunroom is in really, really, really good shape. This is the front bedroom. It got more smoke damage than water damage, but water did go through it. Any of the furniture that's got fabric on it, the fabric all got stripped off. Roseanne came in, our historian, took some swatches of some of this and some of the stuff downstairs so she could try to find something, period, to replace it. But I want you to look right there. You see that water right there? And then here's the same picture. There's the water right there. And now you can really see the water. Okay? Because we went through a 5-week drying process and dried the house out slowly, bringing it up to temperature, both of those doors in that drawer operate. You can open the doors like nothing, pull the drawer in and out. And so it was a lot of money to dry the house out, but it was a necessary thing to do in order to preserve the artifacts. And this is the room cleaned up, except that now the floor is all out. It's not in this picture. The ceiling's all out, and part of the room has been gutted. These valances have been taken down and taken out to be preserved. The bed's been taken apart. This has all been cleaned. That part of it, because of the size of it, has been wrapped up.
Hey, Paul?
Yes?
Who has done that cleaning? Who's been doing
So,
it?
what we did is, and Scott will talk a little bit about the company we hired. We hired a company called National Fire Adjusters, NFA. They work on our side. They are sort of the I was going to say firewall, isn't it a terrible thing? they are the wall sort of between us and the insurance company. We don't really talk to the insurance company. We talk to NFA. They came in and they recommended various contractors to us, and one of them was ServPro West. ServPro West came in. They worked with KA&S. They were the asbestos contractors. KA&S, all their folks had to be masked up, and everything. They brought all of the artifacts out. If you'll notice, we had a large gray trailer behind the house. They brought the artifacts out to that gray trailer. ServPro packaged them up. They took them to their warehouse on Everson Street, and then they've been transferred to another place from there. Additionally, the artwork. So we completely lost 3 pieces of art. We lost, for people that might be familiar, it was a picture of the daughter Susan that was probably about this tall, and it was on the wall that burnt. On the other side of that wall was the picture of, I believe it's like Brockway's son and somebody else, and I should know those people, and I don't. But those 3 were lost. The picture of Dayton Morgan at the top of the stairs is about a foot shorter, but it might be salvageable. But there were 2 pictures of the Brockways that were on the front part of the hallway. The one picture of the missus somehow ended up on the front porch that night into the morning, and I'll show you a picture where we were cleaning, where we actually found the other picture. So this is the children's room. The reason the floor looks so clean is there was a carpet in there, and when they pulled up the carpeting, that was what's left. The dining room was almost completely unscathed. So at the top, at the area above the wall here, the common wall, they had cut a hole out in the hallway area, and water had washed down behind the brick to a certain degree. You can see a little bit of bubbling right here. When we came in the morning after the fire, there was ice hanging off of that. We were able to take everyththing off the top of this. There was a pad on there, and the table is pristine as was before. It's really remarkable. Go ahead.
Everybody has their favorite room in the house. I think we can all admit that. My favorite room is this room. 2 days later, when I got to walk in, and there's icicles hanging from the chandelier, and I'm looking around, the sense of relief that I had that this room has some damage, but it's somewhat bearable. I mean, nothing's really bearable. But just the sense that all the devastation in the rest of the house, and here's the dining room that looks amazing.
So stories that, the dining room for me has a couple of stories also. The stories that come out, I was in Java Joe's downtown getting some coffee, and some of my friends that I went to school with in here, somebody who also, Bob Brzezlowski from Hamlin comes up to me and says, "Is the table still there?" And starts to talk to me, and it turns out we thought the table had come by way of the family, but what I would find out is that Mrs. Manning gave this table to Bob Brzezlowski's grandmother, and he spent many a Thanksgiving as a kid and adult around it. When his grandmother died, he gave it back to the house, and so it's actually one of the heirlooms of the house. Right? So right here, I want you to keep in mind, that's the corner of the fireplace right there. Well, one of the things we found out is we had to clean this out. We had to take all the, they took the hardwood floor out. Underneath, we found this. The dining room was actually a third smaller at one point. See that line right there? The wall came down like that, went through into the kitchen like that, and the dining room was actually smaller. A lot of the, I'm going to say the word, correct me if I'm wrong, Mary Lynn in the back, docent, correct?
Correct.
Those are the people that give the tours in Lowell. A lot more about the house than I do. But around 1890, there was a major renovation in the house, and we would guess that's probably when that took place. Here's the attic. There's the 6-foot hole. There's the 6-foot hole that the firemen caught, which they have to do. Okay, you have to get the heat and the smoke out. It's just, it's nature of the business, right? But what it did is it pulled the fire all across here and burnt that out. You can see a better picture of it there. This is the back of the house. It pulled it across into there also. This is part of that storm chasers that they put up. These are the bricks that fell in this direction. This is the Belvedere. There was a wall and a door here. The stairs that go up. This is burnt across here. And then it's hard to see in this picture. This is the inside of the Belvedere up above. There's plexiglass across here, which was probably a good thing to have because it stopped the draft of the fire to a certain degree. But the pole corner structure back in here is burnt, which is going to make for an interesting reconstruction. So the 4 corners of the Belvedere are supported by 8x8 hand-hewn beams that go from the top of the Belvedere down into the next floor. This is looking down the stairs, and right here, for all of the stained glass in the house, the only damage is right there, and you can see that corner is slightly pushed out. Other than that, we lost no stained glass whatsoever. I mean, it's really, really fortunate. The dining, or the library. The library, that panel and that panel are these. So that panel and that, you see the dark right there, the dark? That was from water. The drywall went down like this, and so it had to be removed. The interesting thing to me is that at some point, I don't know if it was the former, the first fire or before, this whole ceiling was taken down at some point because there's drywall underneath it. There was drywall here that got taken down, drywall under the drywall. So there's a whole drywall ceiling, and then the wooden ceiling was put back up again. Now some pictures that they've gotten done. So this is standing at the top of the stairs. You're looking through into what was the museum room in this picture. And then I went in the museum room, and I'm looking back out on the other side of it. So the museum room, because it was all drywalled, all 4 walls, That had to be totally gutted. This is the 2 hallways. This is the upstairs hallway. This area is burnt pretty severely in here. This is where those pictures hung along here. And right there, in the middle of the debris, was that. Is that not incredible? The frame was gone. The picture was sitting there. Incredible.
Part of the process, as Paul and I have mentioned, was they had to find out where the fire started. And once we knew about where the fire started, then an investigation had to happen. People from the boiler company, 5 groups with their lawyers. We had to wait for them to get together, and that was March 18th. So a lot of what we had done, the abatement process, was able to be done up until that point. We had to wait. That large debris pile with the billiard table had to sit. And it was self-contained, surrounded by plastic. That was the one area that could not be touched. It was lucky that we were able to do things to the rest of the house and actually do things while we were waiting on the investigation portion. One of the reasons why we couldn't put tons of pictures out, we wanted to let everybody see what had been in there, but at that point, legally, we couldn't show anything because we might do damage to potential lawsuits or the investigative process of the fire. Anything that you saw, anything that you've seen not on the Morgan Manning House page, those pictures were obtained illegally. Trespass. There's a guy out there, thought he was funny, got up on the steps, walked through the front door because it was frozen over, and decided that he was going to start taking pictures. Needless to say, that gentleman might have done more damage than it was good, but luckily now we're at the point where we can show you all and have you understand kind of where we're at, which one of the things that I told the board when I took over weeks after the fire was that I wanted total transparency. I want the community to be part of this process. I want them to see and understand what we have in front of us and what we're going to do going forward. Everything that came out of the house is now in a temperature and humidity controlled storage facility on Manitou Road. Everything that came out of the house went into that gray containment unit and was wiped down and cataloged by employees of ServPro. Again, another great connection. NFA, National Fire Adjusters, have worked with us from the beginning to give us advice on who are the best people to contract with to do the kind of work that we're now faced with. We feel we have an amazing team. We have an amazing board of trustees. We have an amazing membership. We have just as amazing a group of companies that are working with us to help get us back to where we need to be.
If I just might add, all of the art, so all the paintings, any of the books, any of the papers, we contracted another company called Polygon out of Hagerstown, Maryland, which is near Baltimore. They came up with a freezer truck a couple days after the fire, and they took all the artifacts out while they were still frozen, put them in a freezer truck, took them back to their warehouse, put them in a freezer, and basically did the same thing to all the paintings and all the books and all what I would call sort of soft artifacts to preserve them down there. That was $37,000 just to move them. And then we got an estimate back, cataloging everything that they took, for $36,000 to restore them. What's going to happen is a team of the Board of Trustees and the historian are going to sit down and decide which things should get restored, which things would be on the, call it the wish list, and the things that really don't matter at the bottom. They may have just been a picture that was bought somewhere. I can tell you with this furniture here, and with this last asbestos abatement that we did, we have been able to save any furniture that belonged to the family itself. Okay? So the family was that whole bedroom set that you saw on the second floor, the, am I losing my train of thought? The table that was in the dining room. There was a table in the billiards room that was actually used by Mr. Seymour, one of the founders. And then there was a cabinet that was that was on the side of all of that debris, where the ceiling fell down. Behind that on the wall was a 3-piece cabinet that belonged to the family, and they were able to take that apart and move it out. And the only thing to that is one of the glasses are broken. So
Basically what we have is we have 2 sets of furniture. We have furniture that is period piece. You've seen it, it fits in the house. Then you have another set of furniture that was either family owned and used, or it was donated from the family or members from the family. So we have 2 different collections, so to speak, of furniture. So where are we now? These are our expenses incurred to date. And pardon me if I giggle a little bit, just because I've never dealt with these big numbers before since I was on the village board many, many years ago, but this is where we're at. So we had asbestos abatement through KA&S, the progress estimate, the overall removal, that is another company. The equipment that we use to dry and heat the building for 5 weeks, the removal and cleaning of the furniture, glassware, etc., the removal of the artwork and the papers, 2 different companies. They specialize in 2 different things. We need 2 different companies. So that brings us down right now to roughly $428,000. Now our insurance coverage, and this is interesting. The one thing that we're all finding out is that, again, being lifelong learners, we are constantly learning more and more and more, and I didn't know I would gain such an understanding of insurance, but I have. The contents. In our traveler's insurance document, we were covered for $77,000. Think about everything in that house. We were covered for $77,000. Now, silver lining, Paul and I have this kind of back and forth that we do now. Paul tells me a bit of bad news, but then he always gives me a piece of good news. That's the deal that we have. We came across, and NFA told us about this line item called Inland Marine Insurance. It was a line item on our insurance. The interesting thing was, the dollar amount at the end was empty. But there was a note. On that note, it said that the schedule of items was contained at an address given in Elmira, New York. Great, we know where it is. Guess what's sitting at the address right now in Elmira, New York, where the office used to be? Parking garage. So NFA was not going to give up. They didn't give up. They asked for a certified copy of the insurance policy, and they kept knocking on that door. All of a sudden, as they continued to knock on that door and want to know what the inland marine insurance covered, we all of a sudden found out that for 10.5 years, we had been paying into that, and that we were owed back $258,000, roughly. That's the kind of relationship, and that's the kind of work that we're getting due to hiring NFA. So that total is about $335,000 with a potential shortfall of about $150,000. Things in the house. Contents. Overall, our structure is insured for $2.2 million. Again, everything that I've learned about insurance, you find out that typically you're going to get 90% of what your insurance says that you should get. Well, MFA has decided that they're going to make sure, because of the investigation and things, this 1.8, they're really looking at this 2.2. And that's part of why we hire them, is that they're working for us. Now, just as a number and as a part of our discussion so far, it's been estimated that rebuilding through our consultant, it's going to be about $4.2 million to get us back where we want to be. And then we get into this. The shortfall will exceed about $2 million. Status of litigation, still up for discussion, not something we can share. We will share as we move forward. Part of why we're here today is because now we can finally talk about what happened. We can show you what happened inside the house. And as part of that transparency I spoke of, we're going to be giving the community updates of where we're at and where we're going. Donations to date. Have you ever met a daisy before? They're about this high. They're in kindergarten. And they're the cutest things you've ever seen, if you've ever had children as I have had. They did a bottle drive, can drive. Thousands of cans. Nickel, 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 nickel. I went and visited them. They presented me with a check. Now, when I walk in, gentleman in a suit and tie with a bald head walks into a group of kindergartners. First thing they want to know, why are you bald? By choice. But I did promise them that the next time they would see me, I would be delivering ice cream for an ice cream sundae party. So they were happy, and then they forgot about the fact of it.
And that is an ongoing fundraiser.
And yes, that is an ongoing fundraiser. They're still collecting, and you can drop off.
They started out at $1,700 the day that they did it, and it's grown from $1,700 to $3,700, 24,000 cans of bottle. Wow. Brockport.
2 Monday nights ago, Sean Bruno and the Board of Education in Brockport presented those young ladies with some great Brockport Better, I think it's called?
Brockport Best.
Brockport Best, thank you. Recognizing them for their work in the community. Now, a couple other fundraisers have happened in the matter of $5,000. Private donations. We've gotten a lot. One private donation that I'd like to just mention briefly. Dollar amount doesn't really need to be mentioned, but it was considerable. Jack Mahan has given us a very nice donation. His family, his sister, and Sue. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. But it's communities. We're looking at right now about $88,000 that have been donated, and that money is constantly coming in. People from Oregon, people from California, all over the country. Our awesome office staff, and Stephanie is here, takes care of all of that, and we are blessed to have a great office staff in offices that are provided by the Brockport Central School District. So, a lot of people coming together. The outpouring of support has been overwhelming. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you one thing right here and right now. Brockport is an amazing community. I can't say enough about Brockport. I'm lucky to have lived here about 27 years. And the thing I don't like about it, even the bridge. Because this community knows how to rally together. The people are invested. People are invested in things like the Morgan Manning House because it means something to all of us. What would you do on July 4th if you weren't there, listening to music, enjoying a great hot dog, enjoying great baked goods? The rallying cry of this community is something that's not going to be stopped. All of you are a part of it. All of you are sitting here today interested. It's going to be a process, possibly 4 more years. I thank all of you for being here this evening because this is just the start. That snowball is just getting the momentum of going downhill and becoming just a wellspring of support. So thank you all very, very much.
So, aside from everything with the Morgan Manning House, okay, if you take one thing home with you tonight, many of the people that I know in this room know that my daughter experienced a house fire in what was our family homestead. She was insured with a thing they called replacement value. Everybody here on Monday should call their insurance agent and make sure you have whatever it costs, replacement value. That's what we're dealing with here, that for whatever reason we did not have, okay? But having replacement value and going through my daughter's fire and sort of being the general contractor on the rebuilding of that, they were insured for $280,000 and they received $435,000 plus additional dollars for contents. That's how important the words are to be insured. And I lost the words.
One thing to wrap it up before we take any questions that you might have. You've got a little flyer, you got a little program this evening. On the back of that, couple things. There is a donation area, there's a membership area. What I'd like you to do, go home in your spare time. We all kind of think about things that have transpired over our day. Think about what you saw here and what you listened to and what is part of the process. We're taking donations tonight, but I would challenge all of you to go home and think about it and think about how you can donate. There's going to be projects coming forward, little things here and there. Windows, this project, that project. How can you contribute? How can you help? We haven't taken a hammer to a nail yet, but we will be. We will be. And we're going to need everybody's help that we can. So again, thank you all very, very much for coming.
All this work that's been done so far, are they still waiting for their money? How's that handled?
So we've already received $750,000 in 2 advances from travelers. So I'm not sure at what point it'll start to tighten down around that $2 million number, but we've gotten so far that amount of money. But that's $450,000 in spent money, and we haven't fixed anything.
Right.
Right.
What about being on the National Historic Register? Is there any monies from that?
So we're exploring all kinds of different grants. We've been hooked up with the Landmark Society. We've already had some different grants sent to us, and so we're exploring all kinds of grants. It will be a benefit, being a historic home. Did I see a hand towards the back at all?
Paul and I are going to be here while you're enjoying a nice beverage and a little bit of snack back there. If you have any questions, please feel free to approach. If I can't get you an answer to a question, I'm going to take your name and phone number and I'm going to get you that answer. That's my promise.
So there's wine, cheese, and some munchies. And the wine glasses are refillable.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Good job.
watching, everybody. Have a great night.